Well, hello, welcome back. This is the second video in a three-part series, Moriarty and the Art of Political Science. Now, in the first video, we took a comprehensive overview of what's happening in education, but in this video, I'd like to focus on physics, because physics is a particular interest of Professor Moriarty. So we're going to have a look and see what's happening in relation to gender and physics in this video. Now, the video itself is based almost entirely on the work of William Collin, and I'm using his article, Feminisation and the Decline of Physics A-Level. So it's virtually his article verbatim. Mr. Collin has generously allowed me to use his material in the production of this video, but I'd like to emphasise that any errors and omissions contained herein are mine and mine alone. So having got that out of the way, let's begin. In 2006, the Institute of Physics commissioned a study into the reasons why girls chose not to study physics at A-level. The report was titled Girls in the Physics Classroom. Its authors were Murphy and Whiteleg, two names that will be mentioned several times in this video. The key findings of this report were discussed in the Department of Education and Skills report, Gender in Education, the Evidence on Pupils in England. If you recall, this report was covered in Part 1. We will look at some of the key points within the report, and the first point the authors make is this. Murphy and Whiteleg refer to studies that have shown that physics and other sciences are measured to be up to a whole grade more difficult compared with most other subjects at A-level and GCSE. Is difficulty, then, a bad thing? It simply means that standards within the subject are high. This perception of difficulty might also suggest that the standard is woeful in other subjects. The second point made in this report is this. These findings have been challenged, but there is still a perception of physics as a difficult subject, which may act as a deterrent, particularly to girls. Why should a subject being hard be a deterrent to girls? If it's hard for everyone. I hope the suggestion is not that girls are not clever enough. I don't believe that. When girls do study physics at A-level, a greater percentage get an A grade than do boys. If for no other reason than if a girl elects to do physics, it is because she's good at it. Another point made by the authors is this. Girls are more likely than boys to give value to the social context in which tasks are posed in defining a problem. Boys are more likely than girls not to notice the context. Some students, particularly boys, see little value in a focus on social context and problems. Well, fair enough. That may explain why physics is less popular with girls, because physics is about inanimate matter, which has no social context. To the authors of Girls in the Physics Classroom and Gender in Education, having gone to the trouble of identifying the problem, the next step is to overcome it. If physics is not to girls' liking, then the authors suggest that physics will have to change, a position taken in the following paragraph. The Murphy and Whiteleg report describes the need for curriculum change and change in teaching and assessment of physics in order to engage girls better. The curriculum should be context-based or humanistic. It should use a wide variety of social situations and contexts to organise and determine the scientific content of the course. Represent science as something that people do, influenced by historical, political, cultural and personal factors, not just as a body of knowledge. Use values inherent in science as topics for discussion and critique. Speaking as a physicist myself, this is a monstrous travesty. I cannot conceal my outrage at having some utter moron piss on my subject. You're going to use social situations to determine the scientific content of the course. This makes as much sense as suggesting you use a proton synchrotron to write a critique of Pride and Prejudice. Grasp this. The whole power of science, and physics in particular, is its strict objectivity. By adhering to rigorous objectivity, we can uncover absolute facts about the world. objectivity is achieved by the exclusion of the subjective. Therein lay the power of the experimental method, prior to which sophists would simply debate their prejudices endlessly. There is no social context in physics. It's about electrons. It's about the motion of the planets, which is not noticeably influenced by the existence of Homo sapiens. It's about the primordial fireball in the first fraction of a second of the universe's existence. It's about pure mathematical constructs of awesome elegance, which it turns out, amazingly, align with the behaviour of inanimate matter. It is gloriously austere and deeply mysterious. It is, in fact, one of the few things that lifts human life a little above the mundane and utilitarian, and these idiots have confused it with technology. Of course, to the faux intellectual postmodernist, there is no such thing as absolute truth. They tell us that science is a social construct, but I don't see them throwing themselves off high places in the belief that gravity is a mere social construct, which is somewhat of a pity. Now for an illustration of what you get if you let postmodernists loose on science. From Sandra Harding, so-called feminist philosopher and philosopher of science. In her book, The Science Question in Feminism, she said, and I quote, "Why is it not as illuminating and honest to refer to Newton's laws as Newton's rape manual, as it is to call them Newton's mechanics?" Well, Sandra, without wishing to dive too deeply into rigorous analysis, that'll be because it's utter bollocks. No, on reflection it's worse. It gives genuine, well thought out utter bollocks a bad name. Or consider that other feminist philosopher, Lucy Erigray, quoted in the book Fashionable Nonsense by Sokal and Brickmont. Erigray regards E equals mc squared as a sexed equation because, she argues, that it privileges the speed of light over other speeds that are vitally necessary to us. Well, thanks for explaining light privilege, Lucy. But to be fair, the invariance of light speed came as a great surprise to physicists too. But you see, that's the point. To the scientist, once the experimental evidence has accumulated sufficiently, it becomes incumbent upon one to accept reality, whether it conforms to one's preconceptions or not. And relativity definitely did not. To the postmodernist, though, the dictum is, if I don't like it, then it ain't so. Recall that wonderfully dismissive expression of Wolfgang Pauli's, not even wrong. Well, these people are without doubt not even wrong. But back to A-level physics. What Murphy and Whiteleg recommended is that physics be changed to suit girls better. To hell with the subject. Let's just replace it with some drivel on which girls can get a good mark. Who cares about real education? As long as we can provide a vehicle to further the feminist objective of dominance. But no one paid them any mind, surely. Dream on, when feminists say jump, people jump. And jump they did. What Murphy and Whiteleg advocated in 2006 in their report Girls in the Physics Classroom was a change to the A-level physics curriculum to introduce or emphasize context and the human element. But Murphy and Whiteleg's report was a review of earlier reports dating predominantly from 1990 to 2005. The changes needed to make physics more appealing to girls had already been well publicized. Consequently, the exam boards were already ahead of the game in terms of providing the required revised curriculum. The exam board, AQA, had already introduced in 2002 a Physics B curriculum called Physics in Context. The use of the keyword context ties this modified syllabus unambiguously to the agenda exemplified by the report Girls in the Physics Classroom. But this was actually in currency for years before this report. The AQA website advocates Physics B in these terms. Physics B, Physics in Context, places the subject firmly in a range of contemporary contexts. It introduces students to new and exciting areas of physics and develops essential knowledge and understanding, all through a context and applications-led approach to capture the interest of students. For capture the interest of students, we can read, in the light of earlier reports, capture the interest of girls. Similarly, the exam board OCR introduced their alternative A-level Physics B, or Advanced Physics, in 2005. The OCR website recommends this new curriculum in these words: "The Advancing Physics course provides a distinctive structure within which candidates learn both about fundamental physical concepts and about physics in everyday and technological settings. It shows the usefulness of the subject and illustrates the impact that discoveries in physics have on the way people live. In Advancing Physics, there are opportunities for candidates to use their imagination and place physics in a social or historical context and argue about the issues that arise." I think this establishes that the changes align with what the first and second reports identify as specifically designed to appeal to girls, but not necessarily to boys, i.e. deliberate feminization of the subject. The exam board Edexcel have retained a single exam but modified the corresponding pedagogy so that it may be either concept-led or context-led. The context-led approach is based on the Salters Horner's Advanced Physics project and has been in use since 2000. An extract from the Edexcel syllabus guide describes the context-led approach thus: "The context approach begins with a consideration of an application that draws on many different areas of physics, and then the laws, theories, and models of physics that apply to this application are studied. The context approach for this unit uses 3 different contexts: sport, the production of sweets and biscuits, and spare part surgery." Again, the keyword context clearly aligns with the intent of the first and second reports. Although there is only one set of exams in this case, the teacher is given 2 different ways in which to approach the material, and we see that the context-led approach is aligned with feminized pedagogy. You might imagine that no harm is done by the options introduced by the exam boards, since only an alternative to the more traditional concept-led approach has been offered, but this is illusory. How many schools can resource teach in one group of pupils Physics A and another group of pupils Physics B? Well, there's none. I suggest a choice of one or the other has to be made. Even if the exam is the same, as in the Edexcel option, the teacher must choose one or the other of the teaching styles, concept-led or context-led. So, which is it to be? Well, which do you think? I have no data for the country as a whole, but I can tell you the position at my local secondary school, a state comprehensive. They have opted for exam board OCR and are studying Physics B, the context-led or feminized syllabus. And how many girls are taking the subject at A-level? In the lower 6th AS year, just 4 girls out of a class of 40. And that is despite the head of physics being a woman, a proper physicist, by the way, with a PhD in particle physics. So, 90% of the candidates, the boys, are being taught a curriculum which has been optimized for the remaining 10%, the girls, because this is what has resulted from a politically driven desire to encourage more girls into the subject. The girls have duly and unsurprisingly declined to oblige, and the boys are left with a feminized syllabus. In conclusion then, I'd like to make a few points. The first point being that in these debates it's quite common, and I've noticed it with Professor Moriarty, that when he's discussing the subject he will flip from physics to STEM or physics to science. Now, we've got to be wary when people do this because he's not talking about the same thing. When he speaks to the subject of physics, that is one particular subject, so the gender representation within physics might be a certain way, But when you flip from physics and go on to the general topic of science, then, as we've seen over these last two videos, an entirely different situation is in place. So we're not talking about the same thing. When we talk about physics, we're talking about a particular subject, but when we talk about STEM and science, we're talking about a wider field and a different situation prevailing. Well, I thought it important to take an overview of what's happening in education, because when we're discussing a complex question like gender balance in a particular subject, it's very easy to lose ourselves in the detail, and we lose track of what's happening around that subject, what the general situation is. And if we fall into that trap, then some of the conclusions that we come to are going to be totally erroneous. In the next video, which will be the final video, we're going to take a good look at the article itself, the natural order of things, and we're going to analyse the argument made by the professor, and in particular we're going to have a look at the professor's understanding of the science. So thanks for listening, and I hope to see you next time.